Climbing is about being relaxed, having fun, being outside, being free from modern society. So you do take your time and you might just spend an hour sat at the bottom because you can. There's no real rush. And then once you start the climb, depending on how hard it is, if you can do it first time, great, and you might have a nice climb, do some interesting moves, but when you start pushing yourself and you get to a move and you're just there, stuck on the rock, and you know you can't go back down because you'll probably fall, but you don't want to go up because you'll probably fall as well, so your mind's sort of wrestling with conflicting ideas, but you do have to go up. I'm Dan. I've been climbing for almost all my life, and I've climbed both sport and trad climbing for most of my life, but I've mostly climbed trad. But when I go to France, Spain, etc., I climb sport because that's what they have, and they don't do trad in foreign countries. The longest climb I've done is about 700 meters, which it was the longest amount of time which it took me to climb. It wasn't the longest distance because it was quite hard to climb. I was with my dad and we're going up the routes, and we might, like I might do a route, get stuck, have to come back down, have a rest, try again, or maybe let my dad have a go to do it. So there was quite a lot of swapping around, which is why it took so long, but we were pushing ourselves, so it ended up taking a long day and we got back when it was dark. But in Europe there aren't that many climbs which take more than a day to climb because we don't have the mountains and we don't have the cliffs here, because they are all quite small compared to other mountain ranges in the world. But multi-pitch climbs are my favourite sort of climbing because I enjoy the amount of height you can actually gain from doing it. So you start in the bottom of a valley where you can just see trees and stuff around you, maybe a few cows and goats. And then by the end of the day, you're on top of a mountain, looking across all these other mountains, seeing the view, maybe seeing the sunset go down, which we did at the time, which isn't normally what happens, but it did that day. But there's this place in America called El Cap, which is the most famous long pitch, big wall climbing area in the world. And for an average good climber, it'd probably take you maybe 4 days to climb it. So you have to take all your stuff up with you, food, a portaledge, which is like a bed which you sort of attach onto the rock, so you sleep on that when it's night. And you don't climb with all your gear, you'll have it in a bag, so you do your route and then you drag all your stuff up after you. So I'd really love to do one of those because they are some of the most famous climbs in the world and the most iconic big wall climbs in the world. And to do them I would need to be a better climber, which I hope to do at some point. And as my ambition of climbing really, to climb one of the climbs in El Cap. Climbers which inspire me are probably John Dunn or Tom Randall. John Dunn because he's been around a very long time, and he's sort of, before him, climbing in Britain wasn't a particularly well known, like we weren't well known for climbing hard things, and he's, in the time he's been climbing, he's given this country 2 grades harder than we had before, so E10 and E11. And before that there was Joe Brown, who was also quite an inspirational character, who sort of introduced hard climbing, because before then we'd just climb for the pleasure of climbing rather than trying to push ourselves. And then with Tom Randall, he's quite a new figure on the climbing scene, but he doesn't want to climb like other people. He'll find interesting things which you don't think you can climb, like cracks which are almost as wide as your body with no holds on them. So you sort of like have to wedge yourself in with your elbows and your arms, which people say it's not a very good way of climbing, but if he's the only one that can do it, then it's pretty good, really. At the moment I'm at university at Loughborough, so it's a big sports university, and on campus it's got its own climbing wall for training in, and then the local town has got a local climbing wall as well, which has quite a few competitions, which is, well, the climbing wall's owned by Tom Randall, which I spoke about earlier, and he's really good at training. So every Wednesday what we'll do is he'll do a circuit training, which is all climbing related. So there's a lot of core work, a lot of upper body, and then stuff done with like hands and wrists to like build up strength there. So we'll do solid circuits for maybe an hour, and then we'll move on to doing sort of boulder power climbing, like using powerful moves that use a lot of muscle rather than technique, because a lot of the climbers there, we already know the technique, we just don't have sort of the power to pull off the hard moves. And then we also do other training in the week. We might go for runs and stuff to like build up aerobic respiration, and maybe go for a swim to build up some more core strength. And then we also go down to the climbing wall whenever if we have an afternoon off or something, we'll text each other, go down, have a climbing session, climb until we start bleeding. And then on weekends there's either competitions or we'll be away climbing, so I am doing quite a lot of training at the moment. I feel my grade has gone up at least 1 grade at the moment, so I am getting better as time goes by. Beginner climbers do deserve to do classic climbs and see what they're like and experience what a true climb is like. But for example, with the free sciences at Stanage, they're pretty well-known routes around the country, and they're also quite renowned for instructors putting top ropes up with people that just go along with trainers. They don't climb properly, so they just shuffle their feet across the rock, which polishes it. So then when there are climbers which want to climb classic routes or introduce their kids who are climbing properly onto classic routes, it's not as good as it used to be, because it's like climbing on glass or ice. Falling happens when you're trying to push yourself. Usually when you're climbing inside, you use it as the equivalent of a gym for most people. So you probably fall quite a lot, but those aren't very big falls because it's sport climbing. So there's bolts in the rock and you just sort of clip your rope in. But with trad climbing, if you are pushing yourself and you do fall, the gear that you put into the rock isn't necessarily as good as it should be or could be. So there is a chance that it'll fall out, and also with trad climbing you can't necessarily put gear where you want it. So you might have a massive gap between 2 bits of gear. So falling, the worst fall I've had personally was a few years ago, or 3 years ago now, where I was doing a climb probably harder than I should have been doing at the time, trying to push myself, and there was one move at the top of the climb, so I didn't bother putting any gear in for a while because I thought I'll just get on top and everything will be fine. So I was going for the top, and then my hands didn't quite get the handhold I wanted. My feet just came away from the rock. Then I fell. And at that moment of time, everything just sort of slows down, and you're just like, the world almost stops as you're falling. And you fall down, and then you see the bit of gear, and you're looking at it thinking, that better hold. And then it came out. And you're like, thinking, next bit will hold, go past it, it pops out. But I mean, as if I was falling, bits of gear that did pop out did slow me down quite a lot. But then I did still deck out, which is hitting the floor. And when I did that, I ended up cracking 2 of my vertebrae. So that's the worst fall I've had, but falls can get quite bad in climbing because there are quite a few people each year which do end up dying from falling. A typical day climbing, you'd wake up quite late in the morning, check out the weather, you flick through the guidebook until you find something you want, and then you spend far too long climbing up to the cliff or walking down to the cliff. And you spend, well, putting on gear does take quite a long time, so you might spend anything from 15 minutes to half an hour depending on how relaxed you are. Climbing is about being relaxed, having fun, being outside, being free from modern society. So you do take your time, and you might just spend an hour sat at the bottom because you can. There's no real rush. And then once you start the climb, depending on how hard it is, if you can do it first time, great, and you might have a nice climb, do some interesting moves. But when you start pushing yourself and you get to a move and you're just there, stuck on the rock, and you know you can't go back down because you'll probably fall, but you don't want to go up because you'll probably fall as well. So your mind's sort of wrestling with conflicting ideas, but you do have to go up. So you just sort of push yourself. You might be on a really bad foothold, like, I know I'll probably fall, but then again I might not. So you just go for it, and once you do it, you sort of like get the adrenaline rush, goes through your body, you're like excited, you might shout to the people below, scream, let off a firework, just have some fun. And then you get to drag the person up behind you who, they might be a better climber than you, they might not. If they're not, you can have a bit more fun with them. So, and then once you get to the top, you get to see the view, which is one of the best things about climbing. You're on top of a mountain, you can see everything around you. A lot of the time you can't see any towns because they're in the middle of nowhere most of the time. You just feel like you're free from society, you're free from having to do anything, and sort of no one can touch you in a way.